Good morning or good afternoon or wherever you are. My name's Graham Gordon Thomas, and I've invented an idea called bio-sequestration to sort of help answer some of the conundrums involving CO2. What this does is look at CO2 not as a waste product, not as a pollution, but a battery, a source of energy. CO2 is a byproduct of combustion of coal. In the heating process, it creates energy that runs the systems, what everyone relies upon. And basically, we cannot exist without. There are many other aspects of coal that appear to be missed by many greenies and politicians, which ought to be understood. There are thousands of byproducts that come from coal that run most of the industries, and the materials we have, or fossil fuels in general, have thousands of byproducts which we can't exist without. From wheelbarrow tires to wheelbarrow inserts to linings in houses and to insulation products, all sorts of products are made from the processing of fossil fuels. Now, if you raise the cost of that process up by increasing the price of electricity, etc., increasing the price of coal, or whatever you're trying to do this, then you damage the whole economic process and disrupt the free market. And it could be a means of creating a trade war, a very underhanded means of creating trade advantages for those countries that need to have that, by making undermining countries will go along with this thing because our politicians are vulnerable to brainwashing about climate change. Now, bio-sequestration is another way of looking at the process, because I am was involved in industrial engineering. I was able to understand that, and we did a bit of biology at school, that all plants process CO2 so they can grow. Without CO2 there are no plants. It's that simple. Now, and without no plants there are no us or any other life form, because plants are the basis of all life, all other existences. Plants really are the dominant life force. They created us, we didn't create them. Now, we owe a lot to plants. We owe it to them to honour them for what they bring. What I do with bio-sequestration is the use of CO2 post the firing of coal into a situation that changes the thinking about food processing or the growing and production of food, as well as other things, which is hemp to make biodegradable plastics, which is something as a rational environmentalist, I'm not a fantasist, that's what I suggest we should be thinking about. Because at 2 degrees, just to think about the 2 degrees warmer they're talking about, if you do a reasonable perusal through the history of climate change, not going back too far, just going back to the beginning of Christian era when things have been checked for quite a lot longer than what people realise. Maybe not on an official basis, but there is enough knowledge there to know that when there has been fluctuations up to 2 degrees more, when Stone Age was built, for instance, and humans did not all panic and die and suffer because of it. And in fact, if you live in the very northern hemispheres, Russia and China, which gets really, and all through Asia, very northern Asia, all through Siberia, where it gets very cold, you might welcome it. When it's minus 20, how can you tell the difference between minus 20 and minus 18 degrees? So it sort of puts it a little bit in perspective. I know they say it stimulates and changes the winds and the oceanic circulations, but there's far more involved in that, as there has been in the past, than just the CO2 that's being emitted in the present. But I'm not looking at CO2 as anything other than a byproduct of firing coal, that's all. You fire coal, you got CO2, and instead of, you can't avoid some of it going in the air, but you could put some of it through as big, as large as sheds as you can imagine, and places what have got coal and flat areas can build immense amount of growing space that then in warmer climates, because the heat can be transferred from the furnaces to and to these growing sheds, you means you've got possibilities of all year round growing of food, because of the very specific reason. If someone said to you what you're going to prepare for climate change, it's a two-way bet. Some scientists say it's going to get colder, and some of us agree that may be possible because of the different, if the sun reduces its heat and radiation, solar radiation, then it's going to get colder, and that may be happening now, and may have been happening for some time now. By 2030, some scientists say we're going to a very cold age. It's going to be colder for a while. Now, if you're thinking about what is your bet, what is the most important aspect of climate change, it has to be food production. It has to be, how do we keep the people fed, regardless whether it's hot or cold. Whether the climate goes up or down in temperature because of the natural variations and fluctuations, that is unavoidable anyway, regardless of human activity or what human does. But the chances of it going colder are equal, regardless of what anyone says, they're equal to background normal variations. They're easily equal to any chances of global warming through CO2 anthropogenic warming. They are an equal bet. If you think about it, CO2 or anthropogenic warming could easily, very, very easily be offset by a reduction in solar radiation. Very easily, cancelled out just like that. And some of us suspect it's being cancelled out now. This is why I'm suggesting if there's anyone who picks this up in the northern climes where it's cold and I guess to minuses for durations, and there's not much sun, and there may be some restrictions in growing, and this may spread. We don't know. 10 years time, 15 years time, the cold may spread. This is the danger of not understanding climate change. It could be colder, but either way, food production for a growing number of people, and making it certain, is a number one priority of any government concerned about climate change, whether it gets warmer or colder. And so far all governments in Australia and US seem to have missed the point, because the left wing are not scientific people. They're brainwashing, they don't actually tell the truth, and they hate a scientific discussion, because a scientific discussion, a rational one, they don't like that, because it may cause them to look embarrassed and be shamed in the fact they don't actually know what they're talking about, or haven't studied it, and they've altered the figures about climates and temperatures and all that sort of stuff. We know that, that's on record. But what's on record goes back a long time, and it just basically gets down to common sense that if there's a reduction in solar radiation at some stage, which predicted there will be by 2030, then that could easily offset or cancel out any increase in climate and in global warming. So in that respect, places that do want to try and experiment, and by using the highly efficient coal-fired power station that you are building, you can build into the system a bio-sequestration system within the system. And that's just a matter, as a refractory engineer, I used to work in industry, that's not too difficult, I imagine, for any other industrial engineer to draw up the plans and the blueprints to put that system into place, or even a small experimental system. But the fact is, it then uses the CO2 and the warmth from you can store the warmth. You can, instead of pumping the warmth out into the air, the heat into the air, that heat also can be stored in what's called stoves. a massive arrangement of refractory material which stores the heat, and that heat can be stored through some sort of a long time and then used to keep or balance the modulate the temperatures within any growing shed over a long period of time. So therefore the use of the coal-fired power station becomes in itself a more advanced understanding. So it's not just keeping electricity running at a more economical rate, it then looks at how it uses the energy on a long chain process. It's a long chain process. CO2 then becomes a battery and a source of energy itself, because that's used, grown into plants. The plants have taken it in or consume it, and they grow, and you can turn those plants into fodder for cattle or biofuels or whatever. But fodder for cattle is just a transference of energy, the original energy, the heat energy, through this process, what creates the CO2 into the plants, then gives the energy into the cattle or the animals for them to grow. So energy is a continual process, but how you make the most economic use out of the energy gives you the greatest capitalist benefit. Greatest capital benefit, or greatest way to grow an economy, is to understand the most efficient way to use energy. And the simple equation is, if you reduce the amount of energy available, you must reduce the ability to grow the economy. If you increase the amount of energy available and lower the price, you increase the ability to grow the economy. So if you're going to tackle climate change, why on earth would you make it worse for people? So by the time the change comes, if it comes, like they say, people are so impoverished, they're not going to worry about the climate anymore. There's going to be so many living on the streets, I suppose those people will be worried. So many being impoverished, so much unemployment, that the climate change, if it hits them, like they say, it's going to be a far bigger disaster than it would be if it just let people alone and not ruin the electricity system and put prices so much up and basically set out to ruin the economy in a very perverse way of reducing the competition some would like to have reduced, because they think they need to run their own economies, which I suggest is the agenda behind their system, the current climate change fantasists, politics, what goes on today. I'm suggesting we have a rationalist, environmentalist approach. So the earth as a holistic system, and the most important environment, as I see, is the average family sitting in the average house, wanting to keep warm in winter and wanting to feed their kids at all times with reasonable food. That is the basic common denominator amongst all humanity, whether rich or poor, but the all humanity needs that's the great common denominator. Sit down, keep warm in winter, and eat decent food. That's the commonality. Whether people are rich or poor is all irrelevant. How much money they've got to consume for goods is irrelevant. That is the basic common denominator of all humanity. And at the moment, that's being destroyed by climate fanatics. And I'm suggesting, by looking at it differently, we may be able to change this around. Thank you. My name's Graham Gordon Thomas. I'm bringing to the world a new idea of rational environmentalism. Thank you. And bio-sequestration, as a means to use CO2 as an energy source. Thank you.